Good morning, everyone. So this is New Year, new regulations, preparing the food industry for 2025. My name is Denise Webster. I am the VP of Food Safety, overseeing our training and consulting at SCS Consulting Services, division of SCS Global Services. I've been in the food industry for quite some time, but ultimately my main strategy is really keeping abreast of all the things that are going on to better service our clients, also lead trainer in BRC, SQF, and all the FSMA items. For those of you that may be joining us for the first time, at SCS, we are an international leader in third-party food safety, environmental, and sustainability certifications, as well as standards development. We do this through specializing in auditing for certifications, verification, life cycle assessments, as well as training and strategic consulting. We are a global affiliations and offices across the world, so better servicing our clients in four main topics, and this is just a laundry list of the things that we can do to help support. So with that, today we are going to dive into the ever-changing food regulation world and really look at what it may be in terms of impacting your organization in 2025 and little crystal ball of what is coming in the future as well. It has been an active couple of weeks, especially with some of the FDA announcements. We will dive deep into those, make sure everybody is abreast of what is changing and those compliance dates. We will dive deeper into some key areas that you may want to know a little bit more about. Food traceability list, for example, we'll talk about that today. And we'll kind of add our tips and those outcome impacts on how you can improve your regulatory and food safety compliance to essentially grow and protect your brands and consumers throughout this course. And as I mentioned, we will allocate time at the end of this for Q&A. Please put your questions in at any time. All right, so I thought let's start with the money. Where does all this changes come from? Well, it has to be supported by the FDA's budget. Every year they publish their budget summary. And in additionally, I've attended multiple conferences in the back end of this year in order to better understand what is their priorities from their mouth, and ultimately what is the new goals of the Office of Human Foods. What are they prioritizing? First, this will be the first year in a while that FDA will experience a flat budget. They've had over the past few years budget increases to support FSMA rollout, the Office of Human Foods rollout, and various other initiatives, but there will be a flat budget, although they have increased some areas such as cost of living, which is outpacing the budget, and those FDA representatives will still have that goal to ensure that they're maintaining the workforce within the FDA and those that are outsourced. So they're hoping not to have a reduction in hiring, which could impact public health initiatives, so that doesn't occur. The budget will also result in less contracts and grants, so that is important for some of those universities and various initiatives that are supported in that capacity. Further though, FDA did stress that they are not changing their priorities for the day-to-day field operations. And when challenged about it during a few of those conferences, they did state that the outsourcing at the state level may see some impact, but that is still to be determined. It was unclear in their response due to the changing administration and where the priorities might lean with the new administration. And we'll speak more about that in a few slides. So overall, their budget is $7.2 billion, but the Advancing Food Safety Nutrition is earmarked for $15 million. The Human Foods Program, $146.3 million, ultimately supporting the food, beverage, dietary supplement industry. They also are addressing issues around the shortage that we experienced in certain supply chain challenges, as well as they've continued to increase the level of inspection for FSMA requirements and just overall modernization of their programs. I've provided for you guys direct links in this webinar that you'll get afterwards. So if you want to read a little bit more about any of these topics that we're talking about, the references will be right there for you. So let's spend a few minutes on getting everybody acquainted with the new structure. There is now fully formed Human Foods Program. They oversee all of FDA regulated food and beverage facilities. This newly formed entity is also under a dedicated deputy commissioner, Jim Jones, and that started, over a year ago. Their approach is going to be ultimately to ensure that the focus is on food and that the source of wellness for U.S. consumers when it comes to promoting food with health and wellness in mind, science-based approach to illness, chronic disease, as well as ensuring chemicals in food are safe. So we're hearing a lot of PR around chemical safety, so we'll talk about that in today's webinar. But no, this initiative has been started many years ago trying to get a more focused effort on chemical safety in our industry. It's also important to note that the Human Foods Program funds will be used to prevent and mitigate foodborne illness outbreaks, strengthening the necessary tools and processes for root cause analysis and investigational aspects of the FSMA rule and partnership with entities, other administrative agencies like the CDC. FDA has noted that their focus will be to strengthen oversight through both public and private partnership. More than ever, they see that value that to have appropriate implementation of the rules, they do need to be more forthcoming and partner with companies, like ourselves, CBs, manufacturers, brands, trade associations, all in order to make the right decision for ultimately the safety and wellness of the U.S. population. Lastly, the FDA has noted they have 3 main areas of focus, which will be microbiological or preventing those pathogen-related foodborne illnesses, nutritional safety, as well as the chemical additives and contaminants, which will include also focused areas around infants and children. Okay, another key area that it's important for everybody on this call to note, which is the Office of Inspection and Investigation has changed the way they've structured their field inspections. Ultimately, they have reallocated the resources in the event of recalls, and they have new inspectorate division boundaries. So for example, West 4 now includes Arizona and Nevada. So how does that impact your programs? Well, you're going to have to double check who your recall coordinator is. So in the event of a recall, your recall plans are up to date, your SOPs are up to date, and that you have a focused or a correct plan to make sure that you're contacting the right entity in the event of a recall. And you can just Google Office of Recall Coordinators and the new list will come up for you. Also, during some of these sessions, the FDA Inspection Office, the Deputy of Foods, specifically noted that the biggest inspection issue that they have found is just basic GMPs, that we're not getting those GMPs right, as well as, of course, preventive controls, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. So really getting the basics and digging back deeper into, do we have a strong foundation for good manufacturing practices, personal hygiene, sanitation, factory design. If you look back at some of the key recalls and outbreaks that have happened this year, 75% of the problem has been the facility conditions and the practices within that facility versus the actual food being the problem. With that said, FDA and FSPCA have partnered to update the preventive controls. We've been, quite a few years now in implementation. We've all gone through the initial 1.0 training, and depending on if you took that training back in 2016 or 17, or maybe even just last year, the FDA and FSPCA recognized that we needed to improve the hazard analysis section. We needed to align it more with principles of HACCP, aligned with Codex, as well as having entities, food manufacturing facilities understand really what are those hazards associated with your raw materials, your finished product, and your facility to prevent outbreaks and recalls. We haven't seen a reduction since preventive controls have came out, and the effort now is to strengthen FDA's learning, industry's learning, reset expectations, and we're going to do this through launching version 2.0. So as of just a week ago, 2.0 is now live, and I would highly encourage any preventive control qualified individuals on this call to consider getting the refresher training. It is now a minimum of 22 contact hours, so it's a little bit longer, but it's actually a really great thing because we're going to spend more time on creating more effective hazard analysis, right? We got to show our work before we decide what the preventive control outcomes will be. So just reach out if you have any questions on that, and you can check out FSPCA's website directly and look at that, download that participant manual even in advance of the training. So let's take a look now at FDA's priorities with a little deeper lens. The FDA has noted that they need to strengthen their regulatory oversight of pre-harvest agricultural water. They're going to do this to ultimately reduce the likelihood of produce becoming contaminated with foodborne pathogens from water used during cultivation. If we look at the past incidents that we've had, the main source has usually been the contaminated water ingress, especially if you look at the romaine lettuce issue. Ultimately, they are focused on furthering their understanding of environmental human pathogens as well, such as Salmonella, to improve food safety practices. And one significant impact is being able to ultimately respond better to outbreaks and use that collective whole genome sequencing data to be able to quickly identify the food that might be impacted during an outbreak, and even now to the potential facility or farm level that it came from. This improved data will also help identifying reoccurring, emerging, and persistent bacterial strains. So that genome tracker and PulseNet data working together will really, with that DNA fingerprint, is going to hopefully propel FDA and CDC to speed up their outbreak investigations. And we'll talk about the food traceability list as well. There's a few other items that are on their microbial safety priority list this year, which is the highly pathogenic avian flu, as we're experiencing those issues right now, and then of course supply challenges with eggs, as well as import seafood safety. They are working to improve partnerships and agreements with other countries. We get a lot of seafood, specifically shrimp, from other countries, and we need to ensure the safety of that supply coming into the US. So now with our chemical safety priorities, under that Office of Human Foods, and you can check out their org chart on the FDA's website. They have a new office, that's the Office of Chemical Safety, which will also include dietary supplement. Originally, we thought it was going to be its own, but now it's under the one umbrella, under the Office of Human Foods. And it will include also an innovation component to that. What are they going to do? Before the latest press on chemical food additives, the FDA has established a new team and initiatives to identify more robust pre-market reviews of past ingredients that we've been using, such as those listed on the GRAS, food contact substances. We've already been working on heavy metals. This is a new initiative, though, by the FDA to really look at post-market assessment and to not just be reactive, but to put forward-thinking scientific technical reviews to redetermine if, say, those GRAS-approved additives, those color additives that we're talking about, are really truly safe in the long run. The Deputy Commissioner noted that some additives may stay the same after this assessment, some possibly lower limits of acceptability or applicability of use, or yes, possible banning, which we'll talk about here, the one that we just learned about yesterday. Although the media and consumer misinformation will always be there, and and in the food industry, we always need to stay abreast of what consumers want and redesign our products accordingly. But the FDA does have a concerted effort to ensure that the foods that are in the market are safe, as well as that ultimately the purpose of these ingredients. We need to combat miscommunication or misinformation because, yes, we do need some of these additives for preserving quality, nutritional value, protecting foods from pathogens, and ultimately more. And so we have to find that balanced approach, but also at the same time, being pragmatic, relooking at the data, reducing those contaminants that could come in as well. So with that said, the drum roll here is the FDA, as of yesterday, has officially revoked the red dye number 3 in foods and ingested drugs. This can be found in many candies and desserts and similar category products where we want that, bright red color to come through. This ultimately started, though, with a response to a color additive petition back in 2022. They did evaluate the studies that showed cancer did occur in rats, although there was no human studies that indicated any issues. Although the FDA, and you can read their full response and notice, did state that the Delaney Clause, which ultimately prohibits the FDA authorizing the use of an additive if it has been found to be induce cancer in either humans or animals. So it doesn't have to be both. So that was enough justification that allowed them to feel confident in banning this ingredient. This also, of course, aligns with the petition and other state level regulations, which we'll talk about in the next slide. So food manufacturers, you will have until January 15th, 2027 to reformulate. And there are, of course, currently other approved red FD&C colors, as well as natural colors, and a lot of consumer re-education of why perhaps your product doesn't look the same as it did prior to this use. Additionally, FDA has announced that PFAS will no longer be approved as a food contact substance. They've removed 35 of the food contact notifications specifically related to packaging, and there is a compliance date of June 30th, 2025. So for all of those entities out there that are concerned about PFAS, this is naturally already being removed from many packaging manufacturers, although there are PFAS in naturally occurring things such as seafood or shrimp specifically and other commodities, so it doesn't completely eliminate the risk moving forward, but please note this regulation has been finalized with a compliance date. Additionally, not noted here, but FDA did also align with state bans on bromated vegetable oil last year as well. So let's talk about the state regulations. California specifically has identified 4, which is the bromated vegetable oil and red number 3, which both are aligned by the FDA to remove, and their compliance dates are much aligned as well with the federal level. Now there's still 2 that if you sell product in California, or even if you sell online and someone from California can purchase your product online, that product would not be allowed for manufacturer sale or distribution. And that includes potassium bromate and propylene paraben. So I'm sure if you haven't been aware already, this is something that you want to look at, and already at a state level, many other states are trying to do the same. So Illinois, New York, Missouri, Penn, they're in various versions of approval propositions to be actioned with similar compliance dates of January 1st, 2027. California also just recently had an executive order to continue their investigation on adverse health effects of synthetic food dyes. No surprise. But also additives in what they're calling ultra processed foods. Now, we don't really have much information. It's just more an executive order, but is something to keep an eye on. And also with the changing in administration, there does seem to be a focus on what is this type of food that they're thinking is not something that is good for the health of the state and just overall federal level. So we have to keep abreast of those changes, as well as look at your own formulations. What do you need to start creating new versions, as well as identify and align with the timelines, and just stay abreast of those changes. Further on the chemical front, wanted to ensure we had an update on the Closer to Zero initiative. So there is a link here which does now show a new cycle of continual improvement. So at any point in time, it's going to have initiatives that are going to be going through the evaluate, propose, consult, or finalize stage. And we do have the completed guidance done for the lead in foods intended for babies and young children, which I have, the next slide has those limits, which we'll talk about. Lead in juice is coming. They're targeting that to be addressed here in 2025, and it's currently in the consult phase. So it's almost ready to be finalized. They're moving towards the green. Although on the arsenic and cadmium side, they're a little bit farther behind. They're still in the discussion on potential action plans and issuing a draft guidance. And they did state this is probably a year out before they get to it into the consult phase or even the finalize. In addition, FDA is planning on issuing additional guidances for hazard analysis and risk-based preventive controls for the spring of 2025. So more FSMA changes as well. Here are those limits. So we have 10 parts per billion for fruits, vegetables, mixtures, yogurts, custards, pudding, and single ingredient meats. And then we have the 20 parts per billion for those products targeted to infants and children that are single ingredient root vegetables and dry infant cereals. So there isn't a mandated testing portion of this, but I think we can all assume that if we need to comply with these lead limits, that testing is going to be a vital way to validate whether or not you are in compliance. This means we have to take a deeper dive scrutiny on our hazard analysis plan, starting with our raw materials suppliers, also then looking at our own formulations, sources, where are we getting those products from, as well as preventing that potential economic adulteration that occurred in the cinnamon that went into the applesauce pouches issue that occurred. So another aspect of this is to consider your supply chain preventive controls and make sure that your HACCP preventive control plans are robust and you've built these limits into your specifications as well as into your testing plan. Another drum roll of FDA announcements. They've been busy the past couple weeks. They announced update to the guidance on allergen labeling. Now we're on edition 5. And if you read very carefully and you looked at the appendix, you would see that coconut is no longer an allergen. Nowhere in the guidance document did it mention that they did this. You just had to intuitively say, oh, we have an updated tree nut list and coconut's not listed. So if you haven't yet, definitely download and read edition 5. Take a look at that tree nut list because they have dropped some of the odd kind of tree nuts that were on that list, not the ones that we commonly would have in our products anyway. So you're going to have to update your allergen matrices, your labels. So one key question you probably all will have is, well, can I still keep coconut on in the contain statement? And if you read the guidance document, it specifically states that if it is not an allergen of concern, then it cannot be in the contain statement. So therefore, if you read between the tea leaves, ultimately, we do have to create a timeline to update our packaging and remove coconut from the contains list because it's no longer seen as an allergen of concern. This also harkens back to the issue that we had with sesame and certain entities formulating their products with or without it and putting it in the contain statement, even if it wasn't actually in the formula, which got them in trouble. So this is kind of the same line. I don't think we're in a big rush. They haven't, provided any compliance dates, but I would just say actively figure out your timing to remove coconut and double check the full tree nut list against your allergen matrix of products. Additionally, in that guidance document, it does state another very important point, which is they're also evaluating the public health importance of food allergens other than the major food allergens they have listed, essentially implying that they could add more allergens to the list at any point, that there's enough scientific data to show that it is a risk to the US consumer. So something to keep an eye out. Lastly, just remember FDA does not have any established thresholds, so we have to make sure we have robust sanitation and allergen preventive controls in place, and that the may contain statement is not standalone, it's not get out of jail free card, and it's not a substitute for not following the CGMPs 117. So definitely read those guidance documents and you'll have a better understanding of FDA's current thinking on allergy advisory statements as well. Ultimately, allergens still are the number one issue of mislabeling and recalls, or at least the top 3 at any given point, and so we have to put the appropriate efforts into place. Okay, so let's talk about the traceability rule. So this is coming soon, and well, I guess in a year. FDA has announced multiple times that through different conferences and their guidance documents that their main focus is to educate before they regulate. Although ultimately they will start performing routine inspections within a year of the compliance date. Although they will start for-cause inspections at the start of that compliance date, as well as, of course, the for-cause is likely due to an outbreak either specifically to your product or maybe that category, that specific industry that has the issue. So just to remind everyone, this is an extension of FSMA, part of the new era of smarter food safety. It all is within that same context, and ultimately our responsibility is to have a traceability program to maintain records that contain an identified key data element, or a KDE, and that during a specific critical tracking event, such as an outbreak, that our responsibility is to provide the FDA our information, our records, the traceability associated with that product within 24 hours or some reasonable time established in compliance in agreement with the FDA. Ultimately, the Office of Compliance and Enforcement has noted that what they're looking for is ultimately the data that you would hopefully already have already. for those key food traceability list items. But their emphasis is that they would like it to be an electronic sortable spreadsheet, or what we're calling an ESS. This ESS, I'll show you here in just a few minutes, is ultimately the way in which the FDA will create a consistent way to get all the information from all the entities involved in a critical tracking event. This way it speeds up an outbreak or recall investigation, and it also serves to ensure that they can be effective and efficient and we're clearly communicating and aligned on what those KDEs are. So if you haven't already, some of the action items for everyone involved here is that the FDA has created an Excel file that can essentially be what they're looking for an electronic sortable spreadsheet. Within that file, there's different tabs with different commodities associated with the food traceability list. I'd highly encourage you to take a look at that, download it, see if it helps kind of guide what that could look like for your operation. In addition, they have a video, and that video takes you through FDA's current thinking. I could probably deliver a 1-hour webinar just on this topic. So I'm giving you guys a little tool to be able to dig a little deeper for yourself as well on this. And upon FDA request, you will have the option to either email or upload your electronic sortable spreadsheet and other, of course, supporting traceability records into the FDA's Safety Reporting Portal, or the SRP. Lots of new acronyms. Their Safety Reporting Portal is a secure web-based portal that will be used ultimately to get the information from all those affected entities as part of the food traceability rule. It's not mandatory, but obviously that is what the FDA would like to see evolve to, and if you watch the video, you'll learn more about it as well. So what can you do now? Well, definitely prioritize any products that you have that are on the food traceability list. And I know a lot of brand owners and retailers that are not on that list that have products are still perhaps asking or mandating you to comply. So pretty much everyone's having to take a look at this, irrespective of if their products are falling on that list. So takeaway is to collaborate with your suppliers now. What are they identifying as their KDEs? You're not responsible for identifying KDEs throughout the supply chain. You have to identify what you're responsible for, which is upon receipt and shipping. So that doesn't change, except we do need to be clear what those KDEs are at any given point, so we know how those are tracked and how we're tracking them. So I would highly recommend just a supply chain map assessment, so you understand where it's coming from and where it's going and what your role is and your responsibility is in that supply chain. Then ensure you can conduct an effective and efficient traceback, and create a mock ESS. Use their spreadsheet to guide that. As well as FDA is encouraging that we look for technology solutions, participating in GS1 with scannable barcodes, improving our technology, our ERP systems. Many retailer distribution centers are having to invest in technology because never before were they really responsible for tracking a KDE. And so many trade associations are out there to help support you. One notable one is the National Fishery Institute. They're doing a lot of work to help that seafood industry, which is very complicated, from aquaculture to harvester to wild, and all the things that happen in between. So just remember, they're not going to require trace back to the original source as just a means of auditing. They're going to only ask this from a company in the event of a critical tracking event, although obviously we need to have this ready to go in those compliant states. Lastly, FSPCA is working to develop training specifically on this that will be recognized by the FDA. Their hopes is around June, and at SCS, we will definitely be one of those providers once it's available. Okay, FDA compliance and enforcement. Just a reminder, I'm sure you guys all know that the renewal date for the food facility registrations came due, and everyone should have done that renewal. It would have asked you for a new unique identifying number, which is your DUNS number. Make sure your scope of your facility and the activities that you do in the facility are accurately represented in that renewal, and that you have the right contacts. Make sure that in the event of an issue, that when the FDA goes and pulls your information, that they're going to reach out to the right entity. And if someone leaves your business, then make sure that that contact perhaps goes to a shared email box that multiple people would be able to get to. You wouldn't want to miss an FDA email requesting certain information. I'll speak briefly to the food defense and IAVA rule. This has been brought up by the FDA on multiple conferences this past year. They recognize that they're a little bit behind on actual implementation. They have conducted, though, what they called quick check audits around 1900. They did stress, though, that this was not verifying adequacy, just creating that awareness and providing resources. Generally, they said they were, happy with what they were seeing, although there are definitely some concerns they've found that will need to be, that could result in warning letters once they start actively enforcing the IAVA food defense rule. One such issue is that the food defense team doesn't have any training or understanding, whether it be formal or informal, on truly how to conduct vulnerability assessments. A lot of companies think they understand the 3 elements or the key activity types and how that works because they're using the food defense plan builder, but that builder is only there as a repository for the work. It's not there to guide you. And what I've personally found, and what I think FDA is stressing, is they're seeing a lot of actionable process steps because we're not doing the vulnerability assessment correctly. Or they're also seeing incorrect or inadequate mitigation strategies. For example, training is not a mitigation strategy. This comes from FDA. Cameras facilitate human observation, but it doesn't mean it is the tool. It's a tool for the actual process step, but there has to be actual work that goes on behind that, and not just I have a camera or I lock my doors. That's not effective or adequate. And ultimately, they did note that they get a lot of questions through the TAN network about the IAVA rule, and they found a lot of the responses as if, as an industry, we just read the guidance, we would find those answers in the guidance document. So takeaway here is make sure you're at least one person on your food defense team is formally IAVA trained. Review your food defense plans this year. Be ready for FDA's actual audits to this. They are growing their team. They are going to be out there actively moving beyond the quick check audits and putting real potential warning letters out if it's not done correctly. FDA's nutritional priorities. As of December 18th, 2024, they have issued a final rule on the definition of healthy. This definition will expand the types of products that can carry that healthy claim. This has been under debate for quite some time. Healthy definition has evolved even over the past few years, but now this solidifies the ability for truly healthy products that wouldn't have been able to be added to that claim can now be promoted. It's also a move away from products that are deemed healthy that actually are supported because they are fortified or they have high in added sugars, or say a fortified white bread with no grain that's not going to be allowed just because it met the sat fat sugar ratio that originally was established. Now we're going to see things more like trail mix with nuts and dried fruit and plain low-fat yogurts, eggs, olive oil. So take a look at that rule if you are making a healthy claim or intend to make a healthy claim in the future. Lastly, on their nutritional priorities is the nutrition at a glance, or the front of pack nutrition labeling. Just recently in Canada, they have already implemented this regulation, and it's very similar to what you see here on that slide with the little magnifying lens, where they're focused on the negative nutrients, sat, fat, sodium, added sugar. We don't know what the output's going to be yet. Could it look something like this? They have, I don't know, roughly around 10 or so other versions of this. Some are colored, some have, different icons. Ultimately, the FDA is getting pressure by Senate and likely the new administration. So pending, the incoming new FDA commissioner. So the deputy of human foods is, my understanding, is going to stay, but the FDA commissioner is going to change, and we'll have to see what mandates come out of that on the front of pack nutrition. So just some things to think about, knowing that this is likely going to be elevated with this expanding pressure, as well as Canada's already declared moving in this direction, and they have compliance dates already. That you should look at your packaging and labeling inventory. Look at the impact of your formulation on those negative nutrients. What would this look like given the guidance documents that they have out right now? And perhaps think about formulation of new or existing goods. Ultimately, this does have to go through the OMB, but I think it's inevitable. It's what it's looking like. Don't want to leave out the USDA. Many of you have meat and poultry facilities. FDA is right there with the FDA and a lot of these same proponents, but when it comes to a specific budget, they do have over 8,000 FSIS personnel with inspection over 7,000 facilities, and their mission is to protect public health, just like FDA, and that everyone deserves safe food. So their initiatives or priorities continue to focus on reducing salmonella illnesses, advancing and adopting innovative policies and procedures within the facilities. So they're looking to modernize and grow as those facilities need to improve, especially if we look at some of the incidents last year that were in USDA facilities. They obviously have a little bit of work to do to rethink how they are approaching non-conformances or NRs within the operations. They do have other initiatives related to other areas, biotechnology, and just partnering with the other entities like CDC and FDA and even IAFP, as well as when it comes to nutrition labeling. They've been delayed on aligning formally with the FDA's updated nutrition labeling from 2016, and they've committed in their priorities that they will publish their final rule by next year. So no real label impacts that I see for the USDA side for this year, but definitely something to keep an eye on from how they align with FDA's direction, especially with the Nutrition Facts panel. Okay, so let's just hear from you guys for a minute, and then we'll cover a few more items and then open it up for questions. So let's see here. Go ahead and I'll launch the poll. Okay, so just want to check in with you guys. Given these changes in regulation, both federal and state, how would you describe your readiness? We've kind of given you some kind of guidelines here to select from. So I'll give you guys a few seconds and let me share with you guys the results. Okay, So 61% of you are in that reviewing and planning mode, which is great, right? This is a testament to really making sure that you guys are ready for 2025, but really excellent to get 18% of you that are probably a lot of what I've explained to you already, you already know. The key thing we need to make sure that we do, even if we're in the 1 and 2, is that senior management commitment. And that's that cross-functional team too, especially with formulation changes to keep the R&D team abreast, keep your customers, if you're, producer of other people's brands, they might not be aware of some of these changes. And so making sure that that is part of our program. And then we have 13% of you that still need that a little extra push. So we'll be passing out this webinar to you guys. So share it with, your senior management, explain why you guys have to shift to be more proactive, because regulation is happening faster than it used to. And we need to be ahead of regulation and not just kind of meeting the minimum, but it does take some more resource to do it. I understand. And then, yes, just 8% of you kind of, we're just not ready yet. So really look at prioritizing, right? What are those things that you can schedule for, and those highlight things that you can work on to then get farther up that chain of feeling a little bit more confident. Okay. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts there with everybody. Okay. So I did want to, given the audience, I wanted to make sure you guys had an update for Global Food Safety Initiative. So as of January 6th, the certification program owners like SQF, BRC, they all need to begin the process of seeking recognition against the new benchmarking requirements. This alignment does require an update to the latest Codex General Principles of Food Hygiene. So if you haven't downloaded the most current version of Codex, which I believe is 2022, please make sure you add that to your to-do list. It now has updated glossary. It has the decision tree built back in. So if you downloaded it back in 2020 when they made the main updates, you'll find that they've got some new stuff in there that you'll want to see. Also, some ISO alignment, no surprise, increased prioritization of food safety culture, as well as those guidelines for things like multi-site operations. In regards to how this might impact, SQF currently is actively incorporating these new benchmark requirements in their edition 10, which will come out in 2025. And anytime you're involved in any of these schemes, you want to make sure you're signing up for their newsletters and their updates to ensure that you have the most current version and know when additions or issues are going to change. So just as a kind of takeaway, some top 10, and then we'll open it up to questions of things that you could do to really focus your team. One, obviously review your KPIs for 2024, look at what the positive and negative trends are and be able to put meaningful and challenging KPIs. Don't just say, oh, well, we've reduced complaints by 20% and, we'll do it again this year. Well, what strategies are you going to do to meet that, or it's not just naturally occurring? Really challenge your KPIs. Number 3, improve your team's knowledge on regulatory compliance. We talked about IAVA formal training, but also just general informal training and one-point lessons and topics to keep everybody informed, so it's not a surprise when things change. Number 4, emphasize the importance of building cross-functional teams. If we're really going to get to that food safety culture, we need to have more informed cross-functional teams. It's not the same team, just different story, a different topic. So really think about who else can help support within your organization. And then we need to communicate those risks and impact to the leadership, so they're aware. They can make forward-thinking business decisions, like packaging, for example, changes in formulation, and ultimately it's our job as the technical leads to communicate the things that might not be on their radar. Create validation and verification schedules. Now is a great time to just relook at, have you done your validations that you said you were going to do this year? Should you improve the type of validation or verifications that you're doing? Remembering internal audits is one of the best tools in your toolbox, and finding any way to challenge your program in new ways. Instead of just kind of doing the same thing that we did last year, how do we prioritize and make some, not change the entire thing, but challenge those areas that are weak. And ultimately just upgrade your training approach versus PowerPoint slides, get out there, do active, hands-on training, observations, as well as get out to conferences and industry events. You definitely learn a lot when you're at least go to 1 or 2 of these a year, and you stay ahead of the curve on changes of topics and just new knowledge that we can incorporate to ultimately protect consumers and have that food safety quality driven mindset. Okay, well, hopefully that was helpful to you guys. Let's go ahead and open it up for Q&A. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at some questions that we've got here. There's quite a few, so just give me just a second to figure out where we navigate here. Kind of feel like a psychic a little bit. Let's see. Yes, and this presentation will be made available after tomorrow. You guys will get an email. So yes, if you currently have PCQI, will there be a shorter refresher course? Thank you, Megan, for that question. I wish that were the case in a way, because then, spending 3 days out of our time to get re-qualified is a lot of effort, a lot of time away. And there is not at this time a shorter refresher version. Although I personally went through it in a day to be a lead trainer of PCQI, and I was overwhelmed by trying to get through all of it in a day. And now I see the importance of re-looking at this, coming with a new fresh set of eyes. Even if you've been PCQI approved in the past, they have a whole new section on the hazard analysis. Even take a look at yourself, and they have a new also appendix that kind of guides you better. So it is a personal choice. It's not mandated, it's not required, but ultimately it is something that you may want to look at to help support, especially if you haven't had PCQI training in a while, or you've had some challenges with your implementation of preventive controls. I really am feeling optimistic about how they've redone the hazard analysis and built in those traditional HACCP Codex type elements in the way we approach it. Great question on FDA creating PFAS limits in seafood. I know there's a lot of conversation with National Fisheries Institute. They, work hand in hand with the FDA. They co-presented at the FSPCA conference. So I don't know yet exactly what's going to go in this direction, although a lot of retailers and brand owners are asking companies to test PFAS in seafood. So we're already having to do a lot of testing, but we don't have a true limit. And so I would definitely reach out to your trade association or NFI to get a little bit more information if you are in the seafood industry. They're a great partner. Let's see. Did they indicate that they would provide appropriate sampling plans? No. Yeah, so there are, we do have, ISO-based, we have statistical sampling plans that we use for micro that we could implement for this, but that it's pretty arduous. I think the best approach is to just start, do some meaningful testing at the raw material level, and see where you're at, and then determine if you need to dig a little deeper and how often. I think it's going to end up being a risk-based approach. We have to comply, but how we comply is not going to be dictated to us. and likely even just through the Office of, Management of Budget, the OMB, they look at the cost of these changes to the industry, and that's typically why they don't mandate certain things. I mean, they didn't even mandate validation of sanitation preventive controls because there was a cost to it. But we're all doing it irrespective. Let's see. Yes, the lead limits actually are not just for infant food, but children, toddlers and children. Any food that's marketed or could be essentially consumed by that, typically consumed by that group, that RDI group, especially if you have an NFP that reflects that, then those limits would apply. Now, ultimately, can we use these limits for any of our food? Yes, we could. We're just not regulated by that. Also, don't forget we have the California Prop 65 limits to also have to address. Did you say that you cannot list an allergen under contains if it's not in the product? Yes, that is correct. And if you download the new edition 5, there's specifically a Q&A that FDA stated that in so many words that it is not allowed to put it in the contain statement. Although they failed to mention that, oh yeah, hey, we've dropped the coconut, and I know many of you have it in your contain statement. So I think at this stage, it'll just be grace and us slowly backing out of that and updating our labels as we do over the next year, possibly two, but I would do it probably sooner than later. Do you think the traceability rule will be expanded to other product categories in the future? Great question. They actually said, yes, they're looking at that all the time. So yes, they've got their priority list, but they were very clear that they will be expanding additional products categories of importance based on risk to that list, as well as I was mentioning, many brands and retailers are asking for this irrespective if your product is on that list. So you'll have to kind of see based on your given business. Lots of questions. I'm definitely not going to get through, unfortunately, all of these today. I think we could have used probably another hour just to dive into everything that's changing. So what I'm going to do is definitely go through and respond to these formally the best that I can. And what we'll do is at a later point, we'll send everybody kind of the Q&A response back. Just a couple ones just to make sure everybody is aligned that yes, you can download and read anything that I covered today. Nothing is, secret. It's all there. Just go to the FDA website and you can download that appendix, and any of those links will be provided in this as well. And we will kind of keep moving on. And sorry that we didn't have enough time to get to all of your questions. Just wanted to let you guys know we do have a full 2025 training schedule, and we offer all trainings in English and Spanish. And we do offer bundled services for not just our food safety claims, but also our product claims like non-GMO and organic. And we do have a separate consulting entity, which we can help you, guide you through these processes to be compliant, whether it be FDA regulatory, GFSI, product labeling, we got you covered. And you can reach out to us at any time. And thank you all for attending and taking time out of your valuable day to learn about what's coming in 2025. Thank you.